The Azurian Empire had ruled the stars for thousands of years. Their ships had touched countless worlds, bringing them under the Emperor's control. They were used to victory. They expected it. Admiral Han stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Celestial Sword, watching the small blue planet grow larger on the main screen. Earth, just another dot on the endless star charts of conquest. "Initial scans complete, Admiral," Captain Kim said, her fingers dancing across the holographic controls. Light from the display cast blue shadows across her face. "Their technology is primitive. They've sent a few basic machines beyond their atmosphere, but nothing that suggests real space travel." Admiral Han stroked his chin, studying the planet's continents and vast oceans. Another easy victory for his record. "What weapons do they possess?" "Nuclear capabilities, but limited. Their most advanced fighters couldn't even reach our lowest orbit. They're at least 3 centuries behind our technology," Kim replied. Han nodded slowly. He had conquered worlds with far more advanced defenses. "Prepare the standard approach. 30 ships should be more than enough for the display of force." Lieutenant Park stood quietly at his station, reviewing energy readings from the planet's surface. His brow furrowed as he studied unusual patterns. "Admiral, I'm detecting strange energy signatures from beneath their oceans and polar regions. They don't match known patterns for their technology level." Admiral Han waved his hand dismissively. "Probably natural phenomena. These primitive worlds often have unusual energy fields." He turned to his communications officer. "Is the conquest fleet assembled?" "Yes, Admiral. All ships report ready." "Good. Set course for their planet. Standard formation." Lieutenant Park wasn't satisfied. He continued studying the readings while the fleet moved toward Earth. The energy patterns were too regular, too controlled to be natural. But he kept his concerns to himself after being dismissed once already. The Imperial fleet entered Earth orbit 3 days later, arranging themselves in the intimidation pattern that had frightened hundreds of civilizations into immediate surrender. The massive ships blocked sunlight from major cities, casting long shadows across continents. "Broadcast the standard ultimatum," Admiral Han ordered. "All frequencies, the common galactic language." The message was simple and had worked countless times before. Submit to the Azurian Empire or face destruction. Resistance was futile. The Empire was eternal. Han expected fear, panic, perhaps desperate pleas for mercy. What they received instead was silence for exactly 7 minutes. Then a response came. "Admiral," the communications officer called out, her voice betraying surprise. "We're receiving a transmission from the surface. It's in perfect Azurian." Admiral Han raised an eyebrow. "Impossible. They couldn't have translated our language so quickly." "Not just Azurian, sir. The message is being broadcast simultaneously in 27 different galactic languages, including 3 that we thought were known only to our linguists." The main screen flickered, showing a simple text message rather than a face. 3 words in perfect Azurian script. "Please leave peacefully." The bridge fell silent. Captain Kim looked at Admiral Han, waiting for orders. Lieutenant Park returned to his energy readings, which had suddenly spiked across the planet. "Is this some kind of joke?" Han finally said, breaking the tense silence. "They think they can order us away." "Sir," Lieutenant Park spoke up, "the energy signatures I detected earlier have increased by 300%. Something is happening on the surface. They're probably activating whatever primitive defenses they have," Han said with a dismissive laugh. "Scan for missile launches or aircraft." "That's just it, sir," Park continued, his voice growing more concerned. "There are no missile launches, no aircraft. But the energy readings are unlike anything in our database." Admiral Han frowned. In his long career, he had never encountered a species that responded to the Empire's ultimatum with such calm defiance. No begging, no threatening, no desperate attacks. Just 3 words and mysterious energy readings. For the first time in many years, Admiral Han felt something unfamiliar creep into his thoughts. Not quite fear. He was too experienced for that. But caution. Send a message to their leaders, he ordered. Tell them we want to speak directly. The response came back almost instantly, again in perfect Azurian. We understand your language. We understand all your languages. We have studied you since you entered our system. This is your only warning. Please leave peacefully. Lieutenant Park's console suddenly lit up with alerts. Admiral, the energy signatures are now focusing directly on our ships. Admiral Han stood from his command chair, a cold feeling spreading through his chest. For the first time in the Empire's long history of conquest, Han wondered if they had finally found a species that wasn't afraid. And that was far more terrifying than any weapon. Admiral Han's pride wouldn't let him accept the strange message from Earth. No primitive planet had ever responded this way. His officers watched him nervously as he paced the bridge of the flagship Eternal Dawn, which had replaced the Celestial Sword as his command center for this mission. They are trying to trick us, Han announced to his crew. His voice was steady, but his eyes burned with anger. This is some primitive attempt to make us think they are stronger than they are. Captain Kim studied the planet's blue surface on the main screen. She had served with Admiral Han for 15 years and had never seen him unsettled before. Should we withdraw and request additional forces, Admiral? Han stopped pacing and glared at her. Withdraw. Before a species that hasn't even reached their neighboring planets, the Emperor would have me executed for such cowardice. He pointed at the blue planet. They fear us, as they should. Let us demonstrate our power. Lieutenant Park looked up from his console, where energy readings from Earth continued to puzzle him. Admiral, perhaps we should. Enough. Han cut him off. Target weapons on their southern ice region. It's uninhabited but will demonstrate our capability. A small taste of what we could do to their cities. The weapons officer nodded and began entering commands. The Eternal Dawn's main cannon hummed as it charged, the sound vibrating through the deck plates beneath their feet. Lieutenant Park's eyes widened as he watched his readings. Sir, something's happening. The electromagnetic readings around Earth are changing rapidly. There. He never finished his sentence. The bridge lights flickered once, twice, and then everything went dark. The hum of the ship's engines faded to silence. Emergency lights blinked on, casting the bridge in a dull red glow. Report, Han shouted. What happened? All systems are down, the weapons officer called out. Main power, weapons, engines, everything. One by one, the screens on the bridge flickered back to life. But instead of showing their normal displays, every screen showed the same message in clear Azurian text. That was your only warning. We've studied your ships since you entered our system. Leave now. Captain Kim rushed to a console, trying to override the display. Her fingers froze mid-motion, and her face drained of color. Impossible, she whispered. They've breached our quantum-encrypted systems. That technology is unhackable by definition. Admiral Han slammed his fist against his command chair. Get those screens back. Restore our systems. The bridge crew worked frantically, but nothing responded to their commands. After several minutes of chaos, the screens changed again. This time, a human face appeared. A woman with short dark hair and steady eyes that seemed to look directly at Han. I am Director Lee of Earth Defense, she said, her voice calm but firm. We have no desire for conflict, but we are prepared for it. How are you doing this? Han demanded, stepping toward the main screen. What technology are you using? Director Lee's expression remained unchanged. Admiral Han, we intercepted your scans of our planet. We know you classified us as primitive based on what you could see. That was your first mistake. Around the bridge, systems began to come back online one by one. Lights returned to normal brightness. The engine hum resumed. We disabled your ships temporarily, Director Lee continued. We could have destroyed them instead. Please understand that this show of restraint is not weakness, it is mercy. Admiral Han's hands curled into fists. In centuries of conquest, no one had ever spoken to him this way. You dare threaten the Azurian Empire? We have conquered thousands of worlds more advanced than yours. Perhaps, Li replied. But you have never encountered humans before. She paused, and for the first time, a slight smile appeared on her face. Your scans detected our public technology, the technology we use in our daily lives. What you failed to detect was everything we've kept hidden. On the secondary screens around the bridge, images began to appear, massive underground facilities, advanced weapons platforms hidden beneath the oceans, orbital defenses that had somehow remained invisible to Imperial scans. For most of our history, we fought each other, Li explained. We became very good at hiding our true capabilities. It became a habit. Admiral Han felt something he hadn't experienced in decades. Fear. It crept up his spine as he watched the images of Earth's hidden strength. You have 1 hour to leave our solar system, Director Li said. We will not give another warning. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in silence. For the first time in the long history of the Azurian Empire, Admiral Han considered retreat. Admiral Han looked at the clock counting down from Director Li's 1-hour ultimatum. Only 15 minutes remained. The other captains of his fleet waited nervously on their communication screens, looking to him for guidance. No enemy had ever treated an Imperial fleet this way. No enemy had ever breached their systems so easily. Admiral, perhaps we should consider a temporary retreat, Captain Kim suggested carefully. We could return with reinforcements. Han's face turned dark with rage. The thought of reporting failure to the Emperor was unbearable. Decades of perfect conquests would be stained by this one defeat. His legacy would be ruined. No, he said, his voice low and dangerous. This is an outrage. These primitives think they can humiliate the Empire. He smashed his fist against the console, making officers jump. Full assault on their major population centers. Target their largest cities first. Sir, Lieutenant Park began, their technology appears to be. I don't care about their technology, Han shouted. 30 Imperial warships against one backward planet. Begin the attack now. The Imperial fleet moved into attack formation. Weapons officers on all ships targeted Earth's largest cities, places called New York, Tokyo, London, Beijing. The massive energy cannons charged, glowing with power that had destroyed countless civilizations before. Fire, Han ordered. Brilliant beams of destructive energy shot from the Imperial ships, racing toward Earth's surface. The bridge crew watched, expecting to see explosions, fire, destruction. Instead, they saw something impossible. The beams hit invisible barriers above each city, spreading out like water hitting glass. The energy dispersed harmlessly into the atmosphere. What? Han whispered in disbelief. Fire again. All weapons. The fleet fired everything they had. Missiles, energy beams, gravity bombs, all met the same fate. Nothing reached the surface. Then Earth responded. Small objects rose from the planet, too small to be proper warships. They were shaped like arrowheads and moved faster than anything the Imperial sensors could track properly. Evasive maneuvers, Captain Kim shouted, but it was too late. The Earth vessels didn't fire weapons. Instead, they simply touched the Imperial ships as they passed, leaving small devices attached to their hulls. One by one, the mighty Imperial warships went dark, their systems completely shut down. Within 3 minutes, 25 Imperial ships floated helplessly in orbit. Only the Eternal Dawn and 4 others still functioned. What is happening? Han demanded, his voice shaking for the first time in his career. How is this possible? Before anyone could answer, a blinding light filled the bridge. When it faded, Admiral Han found himself alone, surrounded by humans in sleek uniforms. They carried no visible weapons but stood with calm confidence. Admiral Han, a familiar voice said. Director Li stepped forward. Please come with us. Han reached for his sidearm, but it was gone. What have you done with my crew? They're safe, Li assured him. We've simply removed you for a conversation. Their ships landed directly on the palace grounds, in the ceremonial garden where only Imperial vessels were permitted. Alarms finally sounded, but too late. Commander Choi and her team of 12 officers were already walking down the ramp onto Imperial soil. Palace guards surrounded them immediately, weapons drawn. Commander Choi raised her hands calmly. We are representatives from Earth. We request an audience with Emperor Min. The humans were escorted through the palace halls under heavy guard. The palace was designed to overwhelm visitors with its size and grandeur. Ceilings hundreds of feet high, walls made of rare metals that changed color with the light, artwork stolen from 1,000 conquered worlds. Emperor Min received them in his throne room. He was younger than Choi had expected, with cold eyes and a tight expression. He sat on a floating throne that kept him elevated above everyone else in the room. So these are the primitives who managed to defeat one small fleet, Emperor Min said, his voice echoing in the vast chamber. Admiral Han's failure will be dealt with appropriately. Admiral Han did exactly what any Imperial commander would have done, Commander Choi replied. He underestimated us, just as you are doing now. The Emperor's eyes narrowed. You stand in the heart of an empire that has conquered half the galaxy. You have nowhere to run, no allies to call upon. Why should I not simply execute you as an example? Choi reached into her pocket. Instantly, 50 guards aimed their weapons at her. She slowly pulled out a small silver device, no bigger than her palm. This contains proof that we've already infiltrated every system in your empire, she said calmly. We could shut down your planetary defenses, life support systems, and economic infrastructure with a single command. Emperor Min laughed. Impossible. Our systems are impenetrable. They operate on quantum principles your species couldn't possibly understand. Commander Choi held his gaze steadily. We understood enough to reverse engineer your ships in 2 weeks. We understood enough to bypass your entire defense grid undetected. She paused. Would you like a demonstration? Before the Emperor could respond, Choi pressed a button on the device. Throughout the palace, lights flickered. The Emperor's floating throne dipped suddenly before stabilizing. Security doors slid open and closed. The massive screens showing the Imperial seal went black for 3 seconds before returning to normal. That was 1% of our capabilities, Choi said. Recognize Earth's sovereignty, or the next demonstration won't be so gentle. The Emperor's face had gone pale, but he quickly regained his composure. This is a bluff, he declared, though fear tinged his voice. A simple power fluctuation, nothing more. Commander Choi pressed another button. A holographic display appeared in the center of the throne room, showing live feeds from military bases across the empire. In each one, systems were failing, ships were powering down, and confusion reigned. We only want one thing, Commander Choi said. Leave Earth alone. Recognize our independence. The alternative is to learn just how dangerous humans can be when threatened. For the first time in his reign, Emperor Min faced an enemy he couldn't simply crush. And it terrified him. Emperor Min sat in his private chamber, watching the recording for the 12th time. The massive screens showed the same thing, exactly 60 seconds of complete vulnerability. The capital's defense grid shutting down with perfect precision. 300 warships floating helplessly, planetary shields vanishing. And then, exactly 60 seconds later, everything returning to normal as if nothing had happened. Play it again, he ordered. His aide looked concerned but tapped the controls. The recording started once more. Emperor Min leaned forward, studying every detail. What disturbed him most wasn't the failure of their defenses. It was the perfect timing. Not 59 seconds, not 61. Exactly 60 seconds. The humans could have extended it indefinitely. They could have fired while the defenses were down. Instead, they simply proved their point and stopped. General Sung entered the chamber and bowed deeply. Emperor, The council is waiting for your decision. Min turned away from the screen. What do you think, General? You've studied their capabilities more than anyone. General Sung's normally confident face looked troubled. They could have destroyed us, Your Majesty. They had complete control of our systems. Instead, they showed restraint. Their technology is unlike anything we've seen before. How? How could a species that hasn't even colonized beyond their own moon develop such capabilities? General Sung handed the Emperor a datapad. Admiral Han's report explains it. They turned their aggression inward for millennia. While we conquered peaceful worlds, they were fighting enemies as resourceful and dangerous as themselves. Every technology they have was forged in the fires of their own wars. Emperor Min read the report slowly. The images from Earth's history showed conflict after conflict, each more destructive than the last. Weapons that could level cities, strategies of deception and counterintelligence more complex than anything the Empire used. And yet they ask only for recognition of their sovereignty and trade rights. Min asked, looking up. Yes, Your Majesty. Commander Choi was very clear about their terms. Emperor Min stood and walked to the window overlooking the capital city. Billions of his subjects lived here, all now at the mercy of a species from a small blue planet they had never heard of before. His pride demanded resistance, but his responsibility as emperor required wisdom. Prepare the treaty, he said quietly. We will sign it as they request. General Sung couldn't hide his surprise. Your Majesty, this would be unprecedented. The Empire has never signed a treaty on terms we didn't dictate, and we have never faced a species like this before. Min turned, his expression resolute. Would you rather I risk our destruction for the sake of pride? 3 days later, in the Grand Hall of Treaties, Emperor Min signed the document with Commander Choi. The ceremony was brief, without the usual imperial fanfare. Earth would be recognized as a sovereign power. No imperial ships would enter their solar system without permission. Trade would begin slowly, under careful protocols. After the ceremony, a young imperial officer approached Commander Choi with a question that many were thinking. You could have conquered us. Why didn't you? Choi smiled slightly. The answer is simple. We've had enough of war, but we'll never forget how to wage it. The next morning, Emperor Min called an emergency session of the Imperial Security Council. The highest-ranking military officers gathered in a secure room deep beneath the palace. Based on all evidence and yesterday's demonstration, Emperor Min declared, Earth is to be classified in our archives as an extinction-level threat. Do not provoke. This classification is to be shared with all fleet commanders immediately. Admiral Quan, who commanded the Empire's largest fleet, objected. Your Majesty, surely this is an overreaction. They are just one planet. General Sung activated a holographic display showing the disabled Imperial fleet. One planet that neutralized our entire defense grid without firing a single shot. One planet that breached every security protocol we have. One planet that could have destroyed us all and chose not to. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Within weeks, unofficial messages began spreading among Imperial commanders across the galaxy. The official reports contained the facts about the treaty and the new classification. But ship captains and admirals shared their own warnings through encrypted channels. The messages varied slightly, but they all contained the same essential warning. If you value your civilization, heed one warning. Run. Back on Earth, Director Lee stood in the control center beneath the Pacific Ocean. On the screens before her, Imperial ships were carefully avoiding Earth's solar system, giving it a wide berth. The treaty was holding. Do you think they understand us now? Asked one of her officers. Director Lee watched a new trade ship being prepared for its first voyage to an Imperial world. It contained no weapons, but its defenses were the strongest ever built. A perfect symbol of humanity's approach to the galaxy. They understand enough, she replied. They understand that we won't start a fight, but we'll certainly finish one. In the years that followed, the Azurian Empire never again attempted to threaten Earth. The small blue planet became known throughout the galaxy not for conquest, but for its unusual blend of terrible power and unexpected restraint. And the warning continued to spread. Run. The end.